The waitress was given 5 minutes to quit. The mafia boss showed up in under 4. The Blue Comet Diner was a smear of grease and buzzing neon on Halyard Avenue. It was 3 in the morning in Hartford, which meant the air smelled like old frying oil and the coffee tasted like regret. The neon sign outside, a sputtering blue-white arc, painted the rain-slicked pavement in flashes, making the puddles look like spilled chemicals. Inside, the graveyard shift nursed their cups, faces hollowed out by the harsh fluorescent lights. This was my world. My name is Mara Linwood. I am 24 years old, and my life was held together by cheap thread and desperation. The thread was this job. The desperation was the stack of medical bills from Mercy Hill Care, where my mother was slowly forgetting who I was. My hand was shaking. I could not make it stop. I was trying to write down an order 2 eggs over easy, hash browns, extra bacon, but the pencil tip kept skittering across the green notepad. Something wrong with your hand? Linwood. Brock, the night manager, was standing too close. I could smell the stale cigarette on his breath and the cheap cologne he used to cover it. He was a man who enjoyed the tiny bit of power he had, and my shaking hand was a gift to him. No, Brock, just tired. Tired does not pay the bills, he sneered, his eyes flicking over my shoulder to the customer. Get the order right. We are not running a charity. I nodded, my throat tight. I refocused on the pad. 2 eggs, hash browns, bacon. I could feel Brock's eyes on my back as I ripped the sheet off and turned toward the kitchen pass-through. That was when the bell above the door jangled. It was not the weary jingle of a trucker or a cop. It was an angry, demanding sound. 2 men filled the doorway. They did not belong. The graveyard shift crowd was all faded denim and worn work boots. These men wore thin, shiny suits that looked expensive from a distance but cheap up close. They scanned the room, their eyes landing on me instantly. They worked for the Board of Urban Holdings, a name that sounded official and helpful, but was just a lie painted on an office door. They were my landlord's thugs. They moved past the booths, ignoring the few customers who looked up, and stopped right in front of me, blocking my path to the kitchen. The shorter one, with a pitted face and a smile that never reached his eyes, pulled a folded paper from his jacket. Mara Linwood, he said. It was not a question. I'm working, I whispered, my voice barely audible. We know. We've got some new paperwork for you. Just a standard rent adjustment. He unfolded the paper and shoved it onto the counter, knocking over a stack of napkins. Sign here. I looked at the paper. The numbers swam. It was not an adjustment. It was a 30% increase, effective immediately. It was impossible. I cannot sign this, I said, the words sticking in my throat. My lease. It is not up for renewal. The board finds your current terms unsustainable, the taller, silent one grunted. But I cannot afford this. The shaking in my hand had spread to my whole body. You know I cannot. That sounds like a personal problem, the short one said, his smile widening. He tapped a thick finger on the signature line. Look, we do not want trouble, and you do not want trouble. Hey, Brock shouted from behind the register. What is going on here? She is on the clock. You are bothering my customers. The short man turned his smile on Brock. This is a private business matter, friend. Not in my diner, it is not. You two. Brock pointed a greasy finger at the door. Out, or I am calling the cops. I almost felt a rush of gratitude, until the short man laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. You do not want to do that, Brock, he said, and Brock's face went pale. He knew Brock's name. That single word changed everything. The power shifted, sucked into the vacuum these 2 men had created. The collector turned back to me. His smile was gone. You are causing a scene. Mara, the board does not like scenes, and I bet your boss does not either. He looked at Brock. She is disrupting your business, creating a hostile environment. Brock, to his eternal shame, did not miss his cue. He saw his escape and he took it. He straightened his stained tie and pointed his finger at me. He is right, Linwood. You are causing a problem. You are always causing problems. All this drama. Well, Brock, no, I pleaded. They are the ones. I do not care, he snapped. I am running a business. Either sign the paper and get back to work, or you are fired for causing a disturbance. You have 5 minutes. The words hit me like a physical blow. Fired. The word echoed in the sudden, terrible silence of the diner. Even the sizzle from the grill seemed to have died down. 5 minutes, Mara, the collector purred. Sliding the paper closer to me, he produced a cheap pen and clicked it. Or you lose your apartment and your job in the same night. Bad luck. Brock, enjoying his moment, leaned against the counter and looked up at the big, grease-filmed wall clock. The clock is ticking. Linwood, 5. I looked around. The other waitress, Cindy, was frantically wiping down a counter that was already clean, her back to me. The cook had vanished into the walk-in freezer. The customers were staring into their coffee cups as if they held the secrets to the universe. I was completely, utterly alone. A 4, Brock continued, his voice loud in the quiet room. My eyes burned. I would not cry. I would not give them the satisfaction. I looked at the paper. Signing it meant starving. Not signing it meant being homeless tomorrow. They had me. They knew they had me. The ticking of the wall clock was deafening. Tick, tock, tick. Then a new sound, the quiet chink of heavy ceramic meeting a formica countertop. From the end of the counter, a man I had not even registered slid his empty coffee cup forward. He had been there when I started my shift, silent in the corner booth, reading a newspaper. Now he was at the counter. He placed his cup down with impossible gentleness. Then, he took a paper napkin from the dispenser and carefully, precisely, wiped up a small ring of coffee beside the cup. His hands were clean, his cuffs immaculate. He moved with a stillness that was more intimidating than the collector's bluster. He was Bruno Corsetti. I did not know his name then. I only knew he was not from around here. He was the dark-suited man who ran the whispering streets, the parts of Hartford that did not show up on official maps. He did not look at the collectors. He did not look at Brock. He looked at me. His eyes were dark, and for the first time all night I stopped shaking. I just felt still. He spoke. His voice was not loud. It was a low, smooth baritone, but it carried to every corner of the diner. She is not quitting. Brock stopped his countdown. The collectors turned. I am sorry, pal, the short collector said. This does not concern you. Bruno finally turned his head. He looked the collector up and down, a slow, patient assessment, as if he were measuring a piece of furniture. And you, Bruno continued, his voice just as quiet, have 4 minutes to leave. A beat of silence. Then both collectors burst out laughing. 4 minutes, the short one cackled. Or what you gonna pour coffee on us? You heard the man, Dom, the tall one added, cracking his knuckles. We better scurry. But in the back booth, the one Bruno had just left, 3 other men sat. They had been silent all night. They all wore the same dark, well-cut coats. They were not laughing. They were just watching. One of them met the collector's eye and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. The laughter died in the collector's throat. I was frozen between them. I was a waitress. I poured coffee. I scrubbed grills. I did not understand what was happening. Why would a man like this, a man who radiated cold, expensive authority, step in for me? Bruno's gaze returned to me. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim leather wallet. He extracted several large bills, more money than I made in a week, and placed them on the small, black tray that held his bill. It was enough to cover his coffee. It was enough to cover my week's rent. Then he did the strangest thing. He looked up, past me, to the old dome-shaped security camera mounted in the corner. Its little red light was blinking. He stared right into it, a long, challenging look. Then he reached up. He was tall enough to do it easily and with 2 fingers. He nudged the camera until it was pointing at a blank patch of ceiling. It was a declaration. This part of the night is not being recorded. The collector, Dom, swallowed. His bravado was gone, replaced by a pasty, nervous sweat. He knew what that gesture meant. He knew who he was dealing with. The bell on the door jangled one more time, soft as a funeral chime, a gust of cold. Wet wind swept through the diner, carrying the smell of the coming storm. The tension in the room was a wire pulled so tight it was humming, ready to snap and slice us all in two. Bruno did not raise his voice. He held out his hand, palm up, toward the collector named Dom. "The paper," he said. Dom clutched it, the cheap paper crinkling in his fist. "I told you, this is a private—" The paper. It was not a request. It was an order, delivered with the flat, cold weight of absolute certainty, slowly, as if it burned him. Dom placed the document on the counter. Bruno picked it up. He read the lines, his face impassive, but I saw a muscle in his jaw tighten. He pulled a sleek, dark phone from his inside pocket. He tapped the screen once and put it to his ear. The diner was so quiet I could hear the tiny click of the call connecting. "Bureau of Night Commerce," Bruno said into the phone, his voice crisp. "Special Inspector, Real Estate Division, I have a code violation on Halyard Avenue. Board of Urban Holdings." He paused, listening to a voice I could not hear. "Yes. Attempting to levy an unauthorized fee, 30%, it appears fraudulent." Dom let out that wet laugh again, but it was high-pitched and cracked. "Bureau of Night. What, never heard of it? We are with the Board of Urban Holdings." Bruno lowered the phone slightly, his eyes fixed on the collector. "That is just a painted sign on a rented door." He spoke back into the phone, his tone bored. "Yes, I will hold." All this time, Brock had been frozen, his countdown forgotten. The big wall clock showed 2 minutes had passed. He was staring at Bruno, his pasty face slowly turning a shade whiter. Recognition was dawning. He knew the face. He knew the name. The whispers from the delivery drivers, the stories the beat cops told, the rumors of the man who owned the shadows in Hartford. It all clicked into place. "Mr. C?" Brock stammered, the name catching in his throat. "1,000 apologies. I did not know you were a VIP, sir. Is the coffee all right? Can I get you anything on the house?" "Of course. Anything." Bruno ignored him completely. He was watching the collectors. Dom's bravado had shattered. He knew Brock. He knew Brock was a coward, but he was a coward who ran this diner. To see him crumble like this in front of a stranger confirmed his worst fears. "Look," Dom said, his voice dropping to a placating whine. "We do not want any trouble. We're just doing our job." "This is not your job," Bruno said, pocketing his phone. The fake call had done its work. "This is a shakedown." In that moment, the greasy air of the diner seemed to clear. I understood. This was not about my tiny, water-stained apartment. It was not about me. I was just the first domino. They were using me. The waitress with the sick mother, the one with the most to lose. They were using me to set a precedent. If they could illegally hike my rent by 30% and scare me into signing, they could do it to the whole block. Sandpiper Row. They were clearing out the tenants, one by one, to make way for something bigger. I was not a person to them. I was just leverage. Bruno turned his dark eyes back to me. The panic in my chest had been replaced by a cold, sharp anger. "If you want to file a complaint," he said, his voice low, "the Civic Integrity Council has an intake office. I know a guy." "Civic Council," I whispered. It sounded just as fake as his Bureau of Night Commerce. "They handle predatory practices," he said smoothly, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. A chair scraped against the linoleum, a harsh, grating sound that cut through the silence. It came from the back booth, the 3 men in dark coats. One of them, a thick-necked man with a flat nose, was leaning forward. His right hand was disappearing beneath the edge of the table. My breath hitched. My eyes darted to his hand. Bruno did not even look at him. He was looking at the man in the reflection of his coffee cup. He had refilled his cup while the collectors were posturing. Now, he casually, gently, slid the full cup of black coffee a few inches to his left. The dark, glossy surface was a perfect, distorted mirror. In it, I could see the reflection of the overhead light glinting off something metallic, the unmistakable shape of a pistol grip. The man under the table was armed. The collectors were just the distraction. These three were the muscle. Bruno picked up his spoon. It was a cheap, thin metal spoon, worn from 1,000 stirs. He tapped it, very lightly, against the ceramic rim of his cup. Ting, ting, ting. 3 distinct, quiet sounds, like a clock chiming in an empty room. It was a signal. A second later, the front bell jangled. A new man entered. He was broad-shouldered, dressed in a way that drew no attention. A simple dark jacket, jeans, work boots. He looked like any other late-night customer, except for his eyes. His eyes missed nothing. They swept the room, noted the collectors, noted the back booth, noted Bruno, and finally, rested on me. He moved to an empty stool 2 down from Bruno and signaled for coffee, his hands resting flat on the counter. This was Ilya Shore. The collectors were now hopelessly lost. They were out of their depth, and they knew it. Dom looked at the men in the back booth, seeking direction. The man with the thick neck started to pull his hand out from under the table. But the attack did not come from the front. It came from behind me. "Get out of my diner!" It was Brock. His voice was a high-pitched, hysterical shriek. He had grabbed a wooden baseball bat from under the register, the one he kept for robberies. In his panicked, tiny brain, he must have decided that I was the source of all this, that if he got rid of me, the dangerous men would leave. He lunged, not at the collectors, but at me. He swung the bat high, aiming for my head. I did not have time to think. My hand, the one that had been shaking all night, shot to the garnish tray. I grabbed the small, sharp paring knife we used for lemons. I raised it, a pathetic 4-inch blade against a 30-inch bat. It was pure, stupid instinct. The bat never landed. Bruno moved. He was not fast. He was just precise. He did not lunge. He simply pivoted on his heel as Brock swung. He stepped inside the arc of the bat, ignoring it completely. He caught Brock's wrist with one hand and placed his other hand flat on Brock's chest. It was simple leverage. A push on the chest, a pull and twist on the wrist. Brock yelped, a sound like a kicked dog. The bat clattered to the floor. Brock followed it, sprawling onto the greasy tile. His wrist held at an impossible angle. Bruno had not hit him. He had not struck a blow. He had just taken him apart. The impact of Brock's body must have triggered something. The diner's burglar alarm, a high-pitched, deafening wee-ee-ooh, started screaming. It was chaos. The alarm was shrieking. Brock was whimpering on the floor, cradling his wrist. The collectors, Dom and his silent partner, were white-faced. The 3 men in the back booth were now standing, their hands clearly visible and empty. The man who had entered, Ilya, had not moved from his stool, but he was no longer a customer. He was a statue, a sentinel. The wall clock showed the full 4 minutes had passed. "Time is up," Bruno said into the noise. The collectors did not need to be told twice. Dom grabbed his partner's arm. "Let's go! Let's go now!" They scrambled for the door, pushing past Ilya, and disappeared into the rain-swept night. The 3 men from the back booth followed, moving with a silent, professional glide. They were not running. They were retreating. The diner door slammed shut. The bell jangled frantically. And then there was just the sound of the alarm, Brock crying on the floor, and me standing there, still holding the lemon knife. Bruno reached over and, with one finger, pressed the reset button on the alarm keypad behind the counter. Silence. It crashed down on us, heavy as a shroud. Bruno looked at Brock, who was rocking back and forth. "Get up! You have customers!" Then he looked at me. He gently took the paring knife from my white-knuckled grip and placed it back on the garnish tray, next to the lemon twists. "Your shift is not over, Miss Linwood," he said. My job, for tonight, was still intact. The silence that crashed down was heavier than the alarm had been. Brock was still on the linoleum, a grown man whimpering over a twisted wrist. The few remaining customers looked like statues in a wax museum, their spoons halfway to their mouths. My heart was a hammering drum against my ribs, but the shaking in my hands had a new quality. It was not just fear anymore. It was adrenaline. It was the sharp, metallic taste of survival. On the floor, near where Brock had fallen, lay the shattered remains of a water glass Dom had knocked over. It was a mess. My job was to clean messes. I grabbed the dustpan and brush from behind the counter, my movements automatic, robotic. I knelt. The grit and cold of the tile seeping through the thin fabric of my uniform pants, I swept the larger pieces into the pan. My hands were still visibly trembling, making the smaller shards skitter away from the brush. A pair of immaculate, expensive black shoes entered my vision. Bruno Corsetti knelt across from me. He did not say anything. He simply reached out and picked up a triangular shard of glass that I had missed. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, examining it for a moment as if it were a diamond. Then he dropped it into my dustpan. As I moved to sweep the last sliver of glass, his hand came down to steady the pan. His fingertips, warm and dry, brushed against the back of my hand. It was not a spark, it was a jolt, a low-voltage current that shot straight up my arm, bypassed my brain, and settled deep in my chest. It was sudden and absolute, a silent shock that made my breath catch. I pulled my hand back as if I had touched the grill. He rose to his feet in one smooth motion and offered me his hand. I ignored it. I pushed myself up, my knees cracking, and dumped the glass into the trash bin. I turned back, wiping my palms on my thighs. He was watching me. His face was a mask of polite indifference, but his eyes were not indifferent at all. They were assessing me. He walked to the register, where Brock had hauled himself onto a stool, his face pale and sweaty. "The check," Bruno said. "What? No, it is on the house, Mr. C," Brock stammered, his good hand fluttering nervously. "Not just mine," Bruno said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the diner's lingering tension. He gestured to the other booths. "Everyone, pay their tabs, and add enough for a new baseball bat." Brock swallowed, nodding frantically. "Yeah, sir, of course, sir." Bruno turned back to me. I was standing trapped between the counter and the coffee machines. He stepped into my space. He was close enough that I could smell the clean, sharp scent of expensive wool and soap, not the cloying cologne men like Brock wore. I had to tilt my head back slightly to meet his eyes. I braced, expecting a question, perhaps a warning. Instead, he reached out, his movements deliberate. He did not touch my arm or my shoulder. He reached for the strings of my apron. My breath froze. His knuckles brushed the back of my neck as he untied the knot. He lifted the greasy loop over my head, his fingers grazing my hair. The apron, my shield, the symbol of my servitude, was suddenly gone. He folded it neatly, once, twice, covering the dark coffee stain, and placed it on the clean stainless steel of the counter. It was not an act of aggression. It was not even an act of kindness. It was an act of finality, as if he were closing a book. I had to speak. The silence was choking me. "Why?" He paused, his hand still resting on the folded apron. "Why what? Miss Linwood. Why did you do that? Any of it? You do not know me." He looked at me for a long time, his gaze so steady it felt heavy. I held it. I would not look away. The girl who had taken his order an hour ago would have been staring at her shoes, apologizing. This girl, the one who had held a lemon knife against a 30-inch bat, would not. "Because they picked the weakest person in the room," he said, his voice flat, devoid of pity. "It is a sloppy tactic. It creates noise, and it offends me." I processed that. He was not a hero. He was a critic. "It was just my rent," I whispered, the words sounding small and stupid. "It was not about your rent," he said, his voice dropping lower. "It is about Sandpiper Row. This diner is the anchor for the block, the Board of Urban Holdings, that shell company they work for. Wants the whole street. They cannot force the leases. So they are squeezing the tenants. They start with the service staff. They get you fired, evicted, you sign a bad paper. Your neighbor sees you leaving. They get scared. They take the buyout. It is a slow infection. A cold dread, different from the immediate panic, settled in my stomach. He was describing my neighborhood, the safety violations at the laundromat last month, the sudden retirement of the old couple in apartment 3B. If this diner goes under, he continued, his gaze flicking around the room, the whole row folds in 6 months. They level it, and something tall and made of glass goes up. They make millions. You make nothing. The anger I felt was so sharp it almost made me dizzy. They are doing it everywhere, I whispered, the connection striking me like a physical blow. My mother. She is at Mercy Hill Care. His eyes sharpened. The indifference was gone, replaced by a focused, assessing intelligence. The bills, I said, the shame rising in my throat, hot and bitter. They keep going up. Small fees, administrative adjustments. I signed a contract, but the wording, it is vague. It is designed to be confusing. Every time I question it, they show me the fine print. It is just like the paper tonight. It is designed to make you lose. I was laying my weakness bare, handing my desperation to a man who had just admitted he despised weakness. Bruno watched me, his face giving nothing away. He did not offer sympathy. He did not promise to fix it. He simply reached into his jacket again, the one that seemed to hold all the answers, and produced a slim, black card case. He slid one card out. It was not a business card. It was thick, black cardstock. Feeling heavy and expensive in my trembling hand, there was no name, no phone number in the center. Embossed in a faint, silvery gray was a single image, a heron, its wings spread, just taking flight. What is this? If you find yourself in another 5-minute conversation, he said, put that on the counter, any counter. I will know. I looked from the strange, beautiful card back to his face. My instincts were screaming. This man was dangerous. He was not a friend. He was a predator. He had taken Brock down without a thought. His men carried guns. He had moved the camera. But as I looked at him, my breathing, which had been shallow and fast, began to deepen, the knot of terror in my shoulders, the one that had been living there for months, started to unwind. My body, exhausted and wired, was making a choice before my brain could. He was a shark. Yes, but the collectors, the board, the faceless men signing my mother's inflated bills, they were sharks too. He was just the one who had, for his own reasons, decided to swim in my direction. Our eyes held for a beat too long. It was not romantic. It was an assessment, a negotiation without words. I was seeing the man who could move cameras, and he was seeing the girl who would pick up a knife. Ilya, the bodyguard, cleared his throat, a small, polite sound that cracked the tension. Bruno broke the gaze. He nodded once, a curt dismissal. He walked toward the door. Ilya fell into step just behind him, a perfect, silent shadow. At the door, Bruno paused. He looked back at the counter, at Brock, who was now quietly trying to call someone on his cell phone. Then he looked up at the security camera, still pointing uselessly at the ceiling. He walked back. I flinched, but he moved past me. He reached up and, with the same 2 precise fingers, nudged the camera back into its original position. The little red light blinked at me. An accusation. He looked at me one last time, his dark coat swirling around him. Tonight never happened, he said. He turned and walked out the door. The bell jangled softly, a period on his sentence. Through the glass, I saw him pause on the rain-slicked pavement before his voice came, muffled but clear. Tomorrow is different. My shift ended at 6 a.m. The rain had stopped, leaving Hartford smelling of wet asphalt and ozone. The sky was a deep, bruised purple, not yet willing to be morning. I walked out the back door of the Blue Comet, my sneakers soaked, the black card with the heron on it feeling like a small, heavy stone in my pocket. My car, A 15-year-old sedan with a cracked windshield was parked in the poorly lit employee lot 2 blocks down. The alley was narrow, walled in by damp brick, the dumpsters overflowing. I was halfway to my car when the headlights flared to life, blinding me. It was a white van, a big one, the kind contractors use. It had no company name on the side, no license plates. It had been parked, lights off, blocking the exit. 2 men got out, not the same 2 from the diner. These men were bigger, dressed in dark utility uniforms that had no logos. They did not look like collectors. They looked like haulers. Mara Linwood, the one on the left, said. His voice was flat, like gravel pouring from a chute. I stopped. My keys were in my hand. I jammed my thumb onto the panic button. A thin, reedy chirp-chirp came from my car. It sounded pathetic in the cavernous alley. "You have something that does not belong to you," Gravel Voice said. He took a step toward me. His partner fanned out to my right, cutting off my path back to the street. "I do not know what you are talking about," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. The terror from the diner had burned itself out, leaving a cold, hard coal in its place. "The agreement," he said. "The one you were supposed to sign, you took it." I did not take anything. I had not. The paper was still on the counter, a crumpled mess, when I left. "Then you're a witness to a business negotiation," the second man said. "That is also a problem. The Board of Urban Holdings prefers tidy accounting. Give us the paper, and we give you a ride home." They were lying. I could see the thick, black zip ties hanging from the second man's belt. This was not a negotiation. It was a retrieval. "I told you. I do not have it." "Check her," Gravel Voice ordered. The second man lunged. I threw my bag, a heavy canvas thing full of loose change, my employee manual, and a half-eaten apple. It hit him in the chest. I bolted, not for my car, but for the narrow gap between the dumpster and the wall. He grunted, swatting the bag away, and grabbed for me. His fingers brushed the sleeve of my jacket, but I was faster. I was running on pure adrenaline. I squeezed into the gap, the brick scraping my back, the stench of rotting garbage filling my lungs. It was a dead end, a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. I was trapped. The 2 men appeared at the opening of the gap, silhouetted against the van's bright headlights. They were dark, massive shapes. They took their time, walking toward me. "Stupid," Gravel Voice said, pulling something from his pocket. "Should have just given us the paper." I pressed my back against the fence, the wire biting into my shoulders. My eyes darted around, a loose brick, a broken bottle, nothing. And then I saw it. On the brick wall to my left, high up, a light flickered. It was not a reflection. It was a focused beam, a small, intensely bright circle of white light, dancing on the brick. It moved, painting a shape, a long neck, a sharp beak, a wide, sweeping wing. A heron? The light vanished. "What was that?" the second man muttered, looking over his shoulder. "Nothing. A car turning. Get her." Before they could take another step, a black sedan, a long, heavy car that looked like polished obsidian, slid into the alley entrance, its own headlights dark. It moved with impossible, terrifying silence, a shark gliding through water. The van was blocked in. A second set of headlights flashed behind the van, pinning it from the other end of the alley. The 2 men froze. They were caught between the 2 cars. The driver's door of the black sedan opened. Bruno Corsetti stepped out. He was not wearing his suit jacket anymore, just a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up his forearms, and a dark tie. He looked like he was on his way to a meeting, not an alley rescue. Ilya Shore got out of the passenger side. "This is not your business," Gravel Voice yelled, his voice suddenly sounding thin. "You are on my street," Bruno said. His voice was conversational, but it sliced through the morning air. "That makes it my business. And you are holding my employee." "My employee," the word hit me. "She is just a—" Bruno took one step forward. Ilya took a step, too, flanking him. Ilya tossed something onto the ground. It skittered across the wet pavement, a dark, star-shaped piece of metal, a caltrop. The driver of the white van must have seen it because he panicked. He revved the engine, the sound echoing off the brick, and threw the van into reverse. There was a loud pop, followed by the immediate, violent hiss of an emptying tire. The van lurched, swerved, and its rear bumper slammed into the front of the second car with a dull, heavy crunch. It was not a crash. It was containment. The two men in front of us looked back at their stranded van. Their faces were pale with the sudden understanding of their new situation. "The girl," Bruno said. It was not a request. Gravel Voice looked at me, trapped against the fence. He looked at Bruno, standing 10 feet away, radiating an aura of absolute, unhurried control. He and his partner stepped aside. "Walk," Bruno said to me. I pushed myself off the fence, my legs feeling like jelly. I walked past the two men. They did not look at me. They were watching Bruno. I walked past Ilya, who watched them. I did not stop until I reached the open back door of the black sedan. I slid inside. The car smelled like new leather. Bruno did not look back at the men. He got into the driver's seat. Ilya got in the passenger side. The car moved, backing smoothly out of the alley. As we turned onto Halyard, I looked back. The two men were standing motionless by their crippled van. The second car, a dark SUV, was still blocking them in. No sirens, no police, just quiet, efficient removal. The car was warm. I started to shake again, the adrenaline leaving me in a violent rush. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You cannot go home," Bruno said, his eyes on the road, "and you cannot go back to the diner. Not yet." He drove through the awakening city, past the milk trucks and the newspaper delivery vans, to a part of town I had only ever seen from a distance. Arden Gate. It was a tall, pre-war building of dark stone, overlooking the gray-green waters of the Harbor Line River. He parked in a private, underground garage, and we took a silent, wood-paneled elevator straight to the top. He unlocked a heavy door. It was a penthouse, but it was empty. Not a stick of furniture, just polished hardwood floors, huge windows looking out at the skyline, and a marble fireplace. "A 24-hour safe house," and he said, walking to the center of the room. "No one knows this unit is occupied." I stood by the door, clutching my bag. "I cannot pay you for this, for any of this." He turned to face me. "This is not about money." "Then what is it about?" I demanded, the fear turning back into anger. "I do not want to be in your debt, Mr. Corsetti." He almost smiled. It was a ghost of an expression, one that barely touched his lips. "Consider it an advance on good faith," he said. "You can repay it tomorrow." He gestured to the keypad on the door. "The code is 1234. Change it." I stared at him. "What?" "Change the code to something only you know. You are not a prisoner here. Miss Linwood, you are a guest. You control the door." He was giving me the keys. He was handing me control. Slowly. I stepped forward and typed in a 6-digit number. The date of my mother's birthday. The small green light flashed. Accepted. "There is food in the fridge, a change of clothes in the closet. The shower works," he said, walking toward the sliding glass doors that led to a wide balcony. He stopped, looking out at the river. I followed him, stopping a few feet behind. The wind was cold up here, but clean. It felt good on my face. "I am going to be fired," I said, the reality of it finally sinking in. "Brock, he will fire me the second I am late." "He will not," Bruno said. "You do not know him. He hates me." "He fears me more," Bruno stated, as if it were a simple law of physics. "Do not call in. Do not send a message. And do not quit. Quitting is what they want. Quitting is signing the paper." "Then what am I supposed to do?" He turned to me. The new morning light caught his face. He looked tired. "Tomorrow," he said, "is your first fight." His phone buzzed, a low, discreet vibration. He pulled it out. It was not a phone call. It was a text message, encrypted, a string of meaningless letters and numbers. He read it, and his jaw tightened again. the same way it had in the diner. "What is it?" He looked up from the phone, his eyes hard. "A message from the Metropolitan Integrity Unit. Another one of your fake agencies." "Another one of my agencies," he corrected, not bothering to deny it. "The Board of Urban Holdings is not waiting. They are not sending collectors tomorrow. They are sending an inspector. They are planning to seize Sandpiper Row, starting with the diner, using an emergency fire safety condemnation order." He looked at his watch. 9 in the morning. That gives us less than 3 hours. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "Are you going to stop them, like you did those men in the alley?" He shook his head, sliding the phone back into his pocket. "No," he said, his gaze fixed on the city below. "They are using paper, so we will use paper. We are not buying a fight tomorrow. We are just buying time." The Civic Integrity Council was not located in a grand, marble-halled government building. It operated out of a rented office on the 3rd floor of a walk-up, sandwiched between a bail bondsman and a defunct dental supply company. The air in the hallway smelled of stale coffee and dust. The community hearing room was just a large, repurposed office space, filled with 100 mismatched folding chairs, by 8:50 in the morning. Every single one of them was full. The people from Sandpiper Row had come. Mr. Petrov from the bakery, his apron still dusted with flour. Mrs. Sanchez from the laundromat, her eyes sharp and angry. 24 other tenants and small business owners, all clutching their own cryptic notices from the Board of Urban Holdings. They were joined by a smattering of curious onlookers and, in the back corner, a young woman with a laptop and a small streaming camera, a blogger, catching the scent of a story. I was at the front, seated at a long folding table next to a woman I had only just met. June Kestrel, she had introduced herself. Her handshake firm, her suit a sharp, practical gray. "I am counsel for Firewatch Analytics. We will be presenting our findings today." "I am just a waitress," I had whispered, my hands clasped in my lap to hide their shaking. The clothes from the penthouse closet, dark trousers and a simple silk blouse, felt like a costume. "Today," June said, her eyes scanning the crowd, "you are a material witness." Bruno was not there. He stood in the back, by the door, next to Ilya. He was not a participant, he was an observer. He wore his suit jacket now, a dark, perfectly tailored shadow. He met my gaze across the room. He did not smile, he did not nod, he just watched. His presence a heavy weight, a promise. At 9 o'clock on the dot, a man in a rumpled suit stood up at the front podium. "We will now open the emergency community hearing regarding the proposed safety condemnation of properties on Halyard Avenue, initiated by the Board of Urban Holdings." A man with a thin mustache and a shiny briefcase took the podium. He introduced himself as Rainer Holt, a senior safety inspector for the city. He spoke in a monotone. Reading from a prepared document, he listed a dozen alleged violations at the Blue Comet Diner: faulty wiring, improper ventilation, a compromised fire exit. "Effective immediately," he concluded. "The property is to be sealed pending a full structural review for the safety of the public." A ripple of fear and anger went through the crowd. Sealed, that was just another word for dead. "We have a counter-presentation," June Kestrel said, standing up. Her voice was clear and carried easily. No microphone needed. Firewatch Analytics was retained by the local Tenants Association 2 weeks ago to conduct an independent thermal scan of the Halyard properties. We have our data here. She placed a large, rolled-up map on an easel. It was a technical diagram of the block, covered in red, yellow, and blue splotches. "As you can see," she said, pointing with a sleek silver pen, "our thermal imaging shows no anomalous heat signatures consistent with faulty wiring in the Blue Comet. The ventilation system is operating at 93% efficiency, well above code." Holt scoffed. "Firewatch! Who your thermal scan is irrelevant. I have a signed order." "We also have a witness to the board's business practices," June said, turning. "Mara Linwood." Every eye in the room swiveled to me. My heart leaped into my throat. June gave me a small, encouraging nod. I stood. The room was silent. I could feel Bruno's eyes on me from the back. "My name is Mara Linwood," I began, my voice trembling so hard I could barely recognize it. "I am a waitress at the Blue Comet Diner." I looked at the faces. Mr. Petrov, Mrs. Sanchez, the blogger, her camera pointed right at me. "Last night," I said, my voice gaining a small measure of strength, "2 men from the Board of Urban Holdings came into the diner. They gave me a paper, a new lease. It was a 30% increase." A gasp went through the room. "They told me to sign it. When I said I could not, my manager gave me 5 minutes to sign, or I would be fired for causing a disturbance." The room was no longer just quiet. It was angry. This was the story they all knew, in different forms. The fine print, the sudden fees, the intimidation. I told them everything. The countdown, the man who had stepped in, the camera being moved. I did not use Bruno's name. I just called him a customer. When I finished, the blogger was typing furiously. The room was buzzing, a low, angry hum. Rainer Holt looked rattled. This was supposed to be a quiet administrative procedure. He held up his signed order like a shield. "This is a legal condemnation order, signed and executed." "We have a question about that order. Inspector Holt," June interrupted, stepping forward. She projected an image onto the wall from a small device. It was a close-up of Holt's order, and next to it, a city payroll document. "This condemnation order," June said, using her pen as a pointer, "is dated October 23rd, a very efficient inspection. However, according to city records, your official appointment as a senior safety inspector was not finalized until October 24th, yesterday." The room went silent. "You signed a safety condemnation order," June said, her voice dropping, "the day before you legally had the authority to do so." Holt's face went from pale to a deep, mottled red. That is a clerical error. The date." "It is fraud, Mrs." Sanchez yelled from the crowd. "It is grounds for a full investigation," June corrected smoothly. "But even if this document were valid, it is now in conflict." A new man, one I recognized from Bruno's Bureau of Night Commerce call, stepped forward. He was dressed as a city employee, complete with a laminated ID. "The Bureau of Night Commerce," he announced, "conducted its own overnight sanitation and operations review. Our report, filed at 5 a.m. this morning, clears the Blue Comet Diner for full operation." He slapped a thick, binder-clipped report on the table. "Our sanitation guidelines supersede a preliminary, and clearly fraudulent. Fire safety notice. The condemnation order is suspended, pending a full review by our department." Holt was sputtering. He had been outmaneuvered, buried in paper by a shell company with a better letterhead. And then, from the back of the room, a new voice. "She is lying, all of it." It was Brock, my manager. He was pushing his way to the front, his arm in a brand new white sling, his face a mask of sweat and terror. He pointed his good hand at me. "She caused the whole thing. She assaulted me. She is unstable. She brought those people into my diner." "Mr. Brock," June said, her voice dangerously soft, "are you a salaried employee of the Blue Comet Diner?" "Yes, for 12 years. "Then, can you explain these deposits?" June projected a new image, a bank statement, a weekly operational fee paid to your personal account from a holding company, the same holding company that owns the Board of Urban Holdings. The room exploded. The whispers were deafening. He was paid. He sold them out. He was in on it. Brock looked wildly around, his eyes landing on Bruno in the back of the room. He seemed to shrink, as if seeing a ghost. He turned and practically ran from the room, pushing past the angry tenants. The man from the BNC and the man from the council conferred for a moment. "In light of this, conflicting data," the councilman said loudly. "The condemnation order is indefinitely suspended. This hearing is adjourned." People started cheering. "Mrs." Sanchez hugged me. "Mr." Petrov was shaking my hand. I felt dizzy, a strange, light-headed wave of victory washing over me. I looked to the back of the room. Bruno was gone. The crowd started to filter out, everyone talking at once, energized, hopeful. I was gathering my things when a uniformed courier stepped in front of me. Mara Linwood. Yes. He handed me a crisp, official-looking envelope and a clipboard. Sign, please. My hands, which had finally stopped shaking, started again. I signed. I opened the envelope. The letterhead was embossed, the Hospitality Oversight Guild. It was a summons. I was being formally charged with gross negligence, endangerment of clientele, and disruption of business operations. A hearing was scheduled for the next day. If I lost, or if I did not appear, my food service license would be permanently revoked. I would be blacklisted. I would never work in a restaurant, a bar, or a diner in this city again. They had lost the building, so they were coming for my life. I walked out of the building, the summons clutched in my hand. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep, cold exhaustion. Bruno's black sedan was at the curb. Ilya was holding the back door open. I got in. Bruno was in the back, looking at his phone. "Did you do this?" I asked, my voice flat. He looked up. "This guild. Is it yours?" "No," he said. "It is theirs. It is real, or real enough. It is where they send problems they cannot solve with bats or fake inspectors." "So you cannot fix it?" I said. It was not a question. "You cannot make a call to your bureau and make it go away." "No," he said. "This is not a fight you can win with a counterfile. This is a hearing. You have to speak. And say what I am, just a waitress. They will have lawyers. They will have Brock. Then you will have a defense." I waited. I expected him to say June Kestrel's name. I expected him to say he would make a call. The car was silent as it moved through the city. We pulled up to the curb outside Arden Gate. He did not get out. He just looked at me. "I cannot be in that room tomorrow, Mara. My presence would legitimize their case against you. They would say you are my creature. So I am on my own." The words were bitter. "You are not on your own," he said. He reached over, but not to me. He picked up a simple, thin booklet from the seat next to him. The Union of Late-Hour Workers. We put it together a few years ago. I took it. It was a handbook. Employee Rights and Responsibilities, a Night Shift Guide. "Read it," he said. "Specifically, Section 4, Hostile Management and Third-Party Interference. Everything you need to say is in there. They are charging you with breaking the rules. You will charge them with breaking the code." He was not fixing it. He was giving me homework. I was furious. I was terrified. And as I looked at him, at his calm, unyielding face, I felt something else. A small, stubborn spark. He was not saving me. He was telling me to save myself. The battle of paper was over. This one was mine. I stared at him, my knuckles white on the flimsy booklet. He stared back. The air in the car was thick with everything we were not saying. He had bought me time. He had given me a roof, and now he was giving me a weapon, even if it was just a 30-page pamphlet. In the small, pressurized space of the back seat, our eyes locked. It was not a look of love. It was a look of comrades, of two people on the same side of a war, bracing for the next shot. And in that look, in the space between the legal briefs and the threats, an alliance was being forged. It was hot, and it was dangerous. I opened the door and got out of the car. "Read it, Mara." His voice came from inside. I did not look back. "I will," I said, and walked into the building, the summons in one hand, the handbook in the other. I had won. The hearing at the Hospitality Oversight Guild had been a disaster for them. When I stood up, clutching the small union handbook, and quoted Section 4, Subsection 2, on an employee's right to refuse engagement with hostile third-party actors, the entire proceeding had frozen. I had not just defended myself. I had, as June Kestrel had coached me, filed a counterclaim against Brock for creating a work environment that invited external threats. My license was safe, but the victory felt thin, metallic. It was just one more piece of paper in a war of paper. I was exhausted. That night, the sky broke open. It was a true Hartford storm, a driving, horizontal rain that turned the avenues into black mirrors. I let myself into the Arden Gate penthouse, using the code that was still only mine. The lights in the vast empty rooms were flickering, the old building groaning under the assault of the wind. I stood in the dark foyer, dripping a puddle onto the polished floor. My cheap raincoat was useless, soaked completely through. My hair was plastered to my cheeks and neck, cold water tracing a path down my spine. I was not sure why I had come back here. I could have gone to my own apartment, to my own small, damp life. But the thought of that loneliness felt worse than the grand, empty loneliness of this place. "You're late." I gasped, my hand flying to my chest. He was standing by the dark kitchen island. I had not seen him. He was not in his suit. He wore dark trousers and a simple gray Henley, a soft-looking shirt that clung to the muscles in his shoulders. It was the first time I'd seen him without his suit, without his armor. He looked less like a boss and more like a man. "I won," I said. My voice was a hoarse whisper. "I know," he said. His voice was quiet, a low rumble under the sound of the rain. "June Kestrel reported. You did well." He was holding 2 mugs. The air, which had smelled of dust and old money, now smelled sharp, spicy, and warm, ginger. "You are cold," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. He did not come to me. He walked to the fireplace, where a low, steady fire was already burning, and set one of the mugs on the marble hearth. He turned to a linen closet I had never noticed and pulled out a thick, white, folded towel. He walked back toward me, stopping just outside the circle of my puddle. He respected the boundary. He held the towel out to me. He did not try to touch me. He did not try to wipe the rain from my face or push the sodden hair from my eyes. His fingers did not graze my neck. He just offered the towel. It was a continuation of the choice he had given me with the door code. Everything was my move. I took it. The cotton was heavy and warm, impossibly soft. I buried my face in it for a moment, the simple, clean scent a shocking comfort. I looked up at him over the edge of the towel as I dried my hair. The firelight was flickering, casting shadows that danced across his face, making his expression unreadable. "I made tea," he said, gesturing to the mug by the fire. "Ginger. It is good for the cold." I dropped the towel onto the wet raincoat I had just shrugged off. I was still in the clothes from the hearing, the dark trousers, the simple silk blouse. They were cold and damp, clinging to my skin. I was shaking, but it was not just from the cold. It was the adrenaline draining away, the exhaustion of the last 2 days, and the strange, pulling gravity of this man. He just stood there, waiting. He was not threatening. He was not offering. He was just present. The silence in the room stretched, filled only by the storm and the crackle of the fire. The space between us felt like a live wire. It was the same static jolt I had felt in the diner when his fingers had brushed mine, but now it was a heavy, thrumming current. I took 1 step. It was not a large step, perhaps 12 inches, but it was a definitive crossing. I had left the cold, wet neutrality of the doorway and entered his space. He did not move. He did not reach for me. His eyes searched my face, and then, his voice low and rougher than I had ever heard it, he asked the only question that mattered. "Are you sure?" He was giving me the choice. He was giving me the out. He was handing me all the power. I looked straight into his eyes. The flickering light caught the dark intensity of his gaze. My fear was gone. My exhaustion was gone. There was only this. I was not the weakest person in the room anymore. I nodded, once a clear, sharp, definitive motion. He did not rush. He moved with that same deliberate grace he had used in the diner. He lifted one hand slowly, as if not to startle me. He did not grab my arm. He did not touch my face. He placed his palm flat on my shoulder, his thumb brushing the base of my neck, right where the cold rainwater had been. His skin was warm. The touch was not a caress. It was an anchor. It was steady. It was not a hand that hounded. It was a hand that held. He leaned in, and his lips brushed mine. It was slow. It was a question. Even after I'd already answered, it was tentative, a testing of the air. I tasted the sharp, spicy warmth of the ginger tea on his breath. I could hear the rain lashing against the balcony doors. I did not pull away. I leaned into it, just a fraction. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for my entire life. My body, which had been coiled as tight as a watch spring, began to unwind. My hands, which had been fisted at my sides, rose. I did not grab him. I placed one hand, palm flat, on his chest, right over his heart. I felt the solid muscle beneath the soft shirt, and I felt his heartbeat. It was not calm. It was not steady. It was a heavy, hammering rhythm, a rhythm that matched my own. That was when the kiss changed. The tentative pressure became firm. His mouth moved over mine, acclaiming. His other hand came up, not to my hair, not to my face, but to my back, spreading wide between my shoulder blades, pulling me flush against him. He was so warm. He was solid, an anchor in the chaos. I kissed him back. I kissed him with the fear from the alley, and the anger from the hearing, and the desperate, aching loneliness of the last 2 years. He walked me backward, his mouth never leaving mine until my back met the cold, rough-hewn brick of the wall next to the balcony. The coarse stone was a shock through my damp blouse. He pulled back, just enough to look at me. His eyes were dark, his pupils wide. His breath was unsteady. He rested his forehead against mine. "Mara," he whispered. My name sounded different in his mouth. Not a name on a list, not an employee, just my name. He pulled his heavy, dark coat from a chair I had not seen and draped it around my shoulders. It was impossibly heavy, lined with wool, and it smelled like him. Clean, sharp, and something faintly metallic. It was a blanket against the cold wall. My hand was still on his chest. My palm felt hot, almost burning. My back, which had been rigid, began to relax into the support of the wall, into his support. My fingers, of their own accord, moved from his chest to the top button of my own damp blouse. It was cold and small. His hand covered mine, his fingers wrapping around my knuckles, stopping me. "Are you sure?" he asked again. "I am," I whispered. "This is my choice. Bruno." His hand left mine. He did not rip the fabric. He did not rush. His fingers, warm and steady, undid the top button. Then the second, his movements were precise. He did not push the blouse aside. He just opened the way. He looked, just for a moment, at the small expanse of skin he had revealed at the base of my throat. The light from the fireplace was a soft, warm yellow, painting my skin in gold and shadow. He leaned down and pressed a kiss there, on the warm skin just above my collarbone. It was not a frantic kiss. It was a deliberate, reverent act, a seal. "You do not belong to them," he whispered against my skin. "I do not belong to you either." I breathed, my hands finding the hem of his shirt. A sudden sharp ting. The sound was metallic, mundane. It sliced through the heavy air. We both froze. Ting. It came from the kitchen. Bruno pulled back, a look of genuine, absurd confusion on his face. "The tea," he said. I set a timer on the stove. A beat of absolute silence. Then a laugh bubbled up out of my chest. It was a rusty, unused sound. I covered my mouth, but it came again. He looked at me, and the corner of his mouth twitched. That ghost of a smile. This time it was real. A quiet, low sound left his chest. He was laughing. The moment was shattered, not by a threat, but by an oven timer. "I should probably get that," he said, his voice still rough. "You probably should," I agreed, my own voice shaky. He stepped back, running a hand through his dark hair. He looked, for just a split second, completely and totally human. He brought the 2 mugs to the fireplace. I sat on the hearth, pulling his heavy coat tighter around me. He handed me one. The ginger was scalding hot, sharp and sweet. He did not sit next to me. He sat on the floor, leaning his back against the phantom arm of a non-existent sofa, facing the fire. "Why?" I asked again, but this time I meant something else. Not why help me, but why this? He stared into the flames for a long time. "I grew up on Cedar Lane," he said, his voice quiet. "The boatyards. My father built hulls, good ones, strong ones." He took a sip of tea. "One day, an inspector came from the city. He found violations. The wood was wrong, the sealant was bad, all lies. He wanted a fee, a facilitation fee. My father was a proud man. He refused. They shut him down. They condemned the yard. We lost everything." He turned his head and looked at me, his eyes reflecting the fire. "They did not use bats, they used clipboards. It was clean. It was legal. And it was just as violent. I learned then that the real power is not in the fist. It is in the fine print. I chose the silent law, the rules that operate underneath." "So you only step in," I said, finally understanding. "When the clipboard is a weapon, when they pick on the weakest person." "I step in," he corrected. "When the scales are broken, what you do after, that is your choice." I looked at this dangerous, complicated man, the man who had saved me with a fake phone call, a bodyguard, and a legal handbook. "I have a condition," I said. His eyes narrowed. "Those men in the alley, your man, Ilya, the guns. I saw the gun in the diner." "It is a dangerous business, Mara." "I know," I said, "but my mother, my life. I cannot be part of that if this, whatever this is, if it involves blood, I am gone. If you solve this with violence, I will walk. I mean it, Bruno." I held his gaze. This was my line, my one non-negotiable. He looked at me for a long, heavy moment. I thought he would argue, tell me I was naive. He nodded once. "I choose other methods first," he said. "The law is a cleaner weapon, but I will not lie to you. It is not always the fastest." "Clean," I said. "It has to be clean." "Then we will be clean," he agreed. It was a promise, a fragile truce in the middle of a war, but as I sat there, sipping hot tea, wrapped in his coat, it felt like the most solid thing I had held onto in years. The penthouse was sterile in the harsh morning light. The storm had passed, leaving the city air feeling thin and scoured. The warmth of the previous night, the smell of ginger, and the improbable shared laughter felt like a dream from a different lifetime. Today, the world was back to being a place of hard edges and cold strategy. Bruno was by the windows, a dark silhouette against the pale sky, back in his suit, his armor. Ilya Shore sat at a long, folding table he must have brought up, which was now covered in laptops and strange, small electronic components. "They were not just watching you," Ilya said, his voice a low monotone. He did not look up from the screen. "They were using you." He held up a familiar object. It was one of the cheap, black plastic serving trays from the Blue Comet. "We retrieved your personal effects from your locker after the hearing," Bruno said, turning from the window. "Ilya is thorough. He checked everything, including the tools of your trade." Ilya flipped the tray over, glued to the underside. So thin it was almost invisible, was a small, dull gray disc, no bigger than a dime. "RFID," Ilya said. "Radio frequency identification. Passive chip. It draws power when it passes a sensor. There is a sensor in the kitchen doorway, another one under the counter at the register." My stomach tightened. "To track me, to make sure I was not taking long breaks." "To track your customers," Bruno corrected, his voice flat. "The chip logs every time you approach the register. It notes the table numbers, the duration of your interactions. You were not just serving coffee, Mara. You were a data entry clerk for their collection network. The Blue Comet is one of their hubs." I felt sick. Every customer I had smiled at, every regular I had shared a quiet word with, I had been tagging them. "It gets worse," Ilya said, tapping a key. A schematic of the diner appeared on his screen. "The chip pings a central server every time it passes the sensor. It uploads its data log. We followed the signal. Signal Wren did, anyway." Signal Wren. "Coders," Bruno said. "The best. They believe in privacy. They owe me for a service I provided. They trace the server. It is not in a corporate high-rise, Ilya said. It is in the basement of the Civic Storage Annex. I knew the place. A massive, windowless block of concrete near the old shipyards. A place where the city kept files that had turned to dust and property seized in raids. The Board of Urban Holdings is running its entire predatory operation off a server hidden in a city-owned basement, Bruno said. That server does not just hold data from your tray. It holds everything. Their real accounting, their contact lists, and this. Ilya opened a new window. It was lines of code, but the comments were in plain, brutal English. Flag medical debt high. Flag single parent late payments. Flag second job low credit, Ilya read, his voice devoid of emotion. It is an algorithm, a redlining program. It automatically flags tenants in neighborhoods like Sandpiper Row for harassment. It identifies the most vulnerable, predicts who will break the fastest, and pushes them to the top of the collection list. It is an automated shakedown. It was a digital version of the collector. Dom. They picked the weakest person in the room. We need that algorithm, Bruno said. We need the data, proof. If we hand that to the Court of Commercial Ethics, we can get an injunction that freezes the board's entire operation. So Signal Wren hacks it, I asked. Too secure, Ilya shook his head. It is air-gapped, not connected to the open internet. The only way in is physical. But that RFID reader at the diner, it has a physical maintenance port that connects directly to the server for diagnostic uploads. It is their one vulnerability. He held up a tiny USB drive, disguised as a cheap keychain charm. Signal Wren built this. We plug it into that port. It will spoof a diagnostic, download the server's core files, and upload them to a secure cloud. 10 seconds. That is all it needs. That port is behind the register, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. Under the counter. Brock Station. Ilya will go, Bruno said. During the dinner rush, he will create a diversion. No. The word was out. Firm. Bruno turned, his gaze sharp, pinning me. This is not a discussion, Mara. Yes, it is, I said, my heart starting to hammer. I won my hearing. I am still an employee. I am scheduled to work today at 5 o'clock. Shift change? Brock will be in the office counting the register. I will be the only one at the counter. Ilya. He looks like Ilya. He walks in, and Brock calls his fake cops. But me, I am just the waitress. I am supposed to be there. Absolutely not, Bruno said, his voice dropping to that cold, flat tone. You are not a soldier. You told me this was my fight. I stepped toward him, my hands clenched. You promised me no blood. This is the alternative. This is paper. This is data. This is clean. I know that diner. I know the blind spots. I know when Cindy takes her smoke break. I know where the cook hides his phone. I can do this. He stared at me. A long, silent battle of wills. He was a man who commanded, who protected. But he was also the man who had given me the door code. The man who had listened to my one condition. If he shows up, Bruno said, his voice a low growl. If anyone shows up, you walk. You do not talk. You walk. You use the Heron card. We will be outside. I will not need it, I said. I'm just going to clock in. At 10 minutes past 5, the blue Comet smelled of simmering tomato sauce and the metallic tang of the grill. It was quiet. Too quiet. My uniform felt stiff. The small USB drive was a cold lump in my pocket. Cindy was in the back, rolling silverware, complaining about her tips. The cook was staring at his phone. Brock's office door was closed. This was it. I moved to the register, my body moving on autopilot. I grabbed a rag, pretending to wipe down the counter. My other hand slipped into my pocket, palming the small drive. I leaned over, my back to the kitchen, blocking the view. My fingers found the small, recessed port under the counter. I slid the drive in, a tiny, faint click. My heart was in my throat. I counted 1,000, 2 1,000. Looking for something you lost. I froze, my blood turning to ice. Brock, when he was standing right at the end of the counter, his arms still in the sling, His face was a pale, sweaty mask of triumph. "Brock," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I pulled my hand back, leaving the drive. I was just checking the receipt paper. "Liar," he shrieked, his voice cracking. "You think you are so smart. You and your rich friends, they told me you would come. They told me you would try something." "Who told you?" "The board. They take care of me. You tried to ruin me." He fumbled for the phone on his belt with his good hand, his fingers shaking. "Citywide compliance wardens. She is here. The one who attacked me. She is tampering with the register. Get her now." I bolted. I shoved past the counter and ran for the kitchen. He was right behind me, screaming. I burst through the swinging metal doors, skidding on the greasy mat. 2 men, the same 2 citywide compliance wardens who had been in the alley. They had been waiting. They stood between me and the back door. I was trapped. Brock was blocking the door to the dining room. The 2 wardens were blocking the exit. To my left was the humming, metal-clad door of the walk-in freezer. "Nowhere to go, Mara," Brock sneered, his eyes wild. "You are finished. You are going to jail." The 2 men stepped toward me, their hands reaching, their faces impassive. A loud, authoritative knock hammered on the diner's front door. Brock paused, his head tilting. "What the hell now?" "Hartford Gas and Power," a man's voice boomed from the front. "We have an anonymous report of a significant gas leak. We are required to inspect the meter immediately." Brock looked confused. "We did not call anyone." "It is not a request, sir," the voice yelled, louder now. "This is a mandatory safety inspection. We need to clear this building." The 2 wardens looked at each other. A gas leak was official business. It was sirens. It was paperwork. It was not what they were paid for. "The meter is in the back," Brock grumbled, furious at the interruption. "Through the kitchen." The swinging doors burst open. It was not Bruno. It was a man I had never seen, dressed in a heavy blue utility uniform. Holding a clipboard in one hand and a complex digital gauge in the other, he radiated pure, bureaucratic annoyance. "Sir, I need this area cleared," the gas man snapped, not even looking at me or the wardens. "Our readings are spiking. The main meter is behind that freezer unit. If this line has a structural failure, it could take out the whole block. You." He pointed his clipboard at Brock. "And you too. I need you at the front of the building. Now." "But she," Brock sputtered, pointing at me. "Do you want to be listed on the incident report as obstructing a Class 3 safety procedure?" the gas man snapped. "Out now." The wardens were not going to argue with a potential explosion. They grabbed Brock by his good arm. "Come on, boss. Let's go." They pushed Brock out into the dining room. The gas man turned to me, his back to the open doors. "You too. Miss, you need to evacuate." "I cannot," I whispered, my voice shaking. "They are waiting for me." He looked at me, his eyes sharp under the brim of his hard hat. "Then do not use the front door." He jabbed his clipboard toward the dark corner of the kitchen. "The old condiment storeroom. The lock has been rusted out for a decade. It opens into the north alley." He turned his back on me, knelt by the wall, and started tapping his gauge. "I have got to check this valve," he yelled toward the dining room. He was one of them. This was Bruno's move. Clean, no blood, just a uniform and a clipboard. I did not wait. I ran for the storeroom. It was a dark, narrow space that smelled of vinegar and stale spices. I threw my shoulder against the old wooden door. It groaned, the rotten wood splintering, and then burst open. I stumbled out into the narrow, dark alley, gasping for air. A black sedan was idling silently, 10 feet away. Ilya was standing by the open passenger door. "The drive," he said, holding out his hand. I did not get it back. I panted, my heart hammering. "It is still in the register. I got trapped." He did not get angry. He did not move. He just looked at my face, then at the side door of the diner. "Wait in the car." "What, Ilya? No, they are in there, the wardens." He ignored me. He walked, not ran, straight to the diner's kitchen door and slipped inside. I climbed into the car, my hands shaking so badly I could not buckle the seatbelt. I stared at the door. 1 minute. 2 minutes. It felt like an eternity. The door opened. Ilya emerged. Walking just as calmly, he was holding the tiny USB charm. He got into the driver's seat and plugged the drive into his laptop. "Brock is sloppy," he said, his fingers flying across the keys. He was so busy screaming at his employees that he forgot the gas man needed to check the register's power conduit. Too simple. He had walked right past them, retrieved the drive, and walked out. "Signal Wren has it," he said as the car pulled silently away from the curb. "The data is good. Uploading to the Court of Commercial Ethics. Anonymous tip." We were halfway across the Halyard Bridge when Ilya's phone chimed. A single, soft tone, a text message appeared. Active. He made a call. One word. Go. He turned the car, not toward Arden Gate, but toward the industrial sector. He parked in the shadows of an overpass, a block away from the Civic Storage Annex. "What are we doing?" I whispered. "Watching," he said. The massive by-windowless building was dark, a tomb. Then, the first car came, a dark sedan, no markings, moving fast with its lights off. It turned into the annex's service driveway. A second later, another, then 2 more. Within minutes, the entire block was sealed. Dark vans, men in black tactical gear, not police uniforms, moving with a silent, fluid efficiency. They were not knocking, they were breaching the basement. "Who are they?" I breathed. "Metropolitan Integrity Unit," Ilya said, his face illuminated by the distant, flashing blue lights that had just begun. "They just received a very credible, very anonymous tip about a shadow server, operated by the Board of Urban Holdings, running a criminal redlining algorithm from a city-owned basement." The victory at the annex felt like a ghost. It was a win on paper, a tactical blow, but it brought no peace. The Board of Urban Holdings was a serpent. We had cut off its tail, but the head was still in the shadows, angry and ready to strike. I was in the penthouse at Arden Gate, which now felt less like a safe house and more like a gilded cage. I was waiting. I did not know for what, but the silence was heavy, brittle. My phone rang. The screen showed the main number for Mercy Hill Care. My heart did not just drop, it evaporated. Miss Linwood. The voice was new, a crisp, cold administrator. It was not the friendly night nurse. "This is she. Is my mother all right?" "Your mother is fine," the voice said, the word fine sounding like a threat. "We are calling to inform you of a wonderful development. She has been selected for our new priority care wing. We are moving her as of right now." "Moving her? It is 11 o'clock at night. I do not understand. What wing?" "It is a recent upgrade, state-of-the-art monitoring. It is a very secure facility, which means, unfortunately, that all visitation and outside calls will be restricted for the next 72 hours while we calibrate the new equipment." The words, secure, restricted, calibrate, they were sterile, technical, and they meant hostage. "You cannot do that," I whispered, my hand gripping the phone. "Oh, it is already done, Miss Linwood," the administrator said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "And while I have you, we must discuss the outstanding complaint you filed with the Hospitality Guild. We find that such aggressive actions often correlate with complications in patient files. If that complaint were to be withdrawn, say by morning, I am quite sure we could expedite her calibration. Do you understand?" The line clicked dead. I looked up. Bruno was by the window, watching me. He had not heard the words, but he read the answer on my face. "What?" he asked, his voice flat. "They have her. At Mercy Hill. They moved her to a secure wing, no calls, no visitors. They said I have to withdraw the complaint." For a full 10 seconds, he did not move. He was utterly still. Then, the mask of control did not just crack, it vanished. His face, for the first time, was not cold. It was hot. It was a still, white-hot rage. He turned to Ilya, who was already standing, his hand on his phone. "Get the car," Bruno said. His voice was deadly quiet. "We are going to Mercy Hill." "What are you going to do?" I said, my voice shaking. "I am going to walk in," he said, "and I am going to walk out with your mother. It will take less than 10 minutes. He was not talking about paper. He was talking about force. He was going to lift her, to take her. "No." He stopped, his hand on the door. "Mara, this is not a discussion. They have her. This is the direct solution." "No," I said, louder this time, stepping in front of him. "You cannot. That is the line. My line. You promised. No blood." "They put their hands on your mother," he growled, his voice a low vibration of fury. "My promise was about our fight. They just broke the rules." "And if we break them back, we are no better," I was shouting now, my hands clenched. "What happens? Bruno, you and Ilya walk in, you push past nurses, you fight security guards who are just doing their jobs. You start a war inside a hospital. What about the other patients? What happens when the board retaliates against them to cover their tracks? You cannot. This is what they want. They want you to use force. They want you to be the monster so they can be the victims." He stared at me, his jaw working. He was a man of absolute power, being told no by a waitress he had saved. "It is the slow way, Mara," he said, the words biting. "It is the right way," I countered, my voice breaking but firm. "We do this clean. We do this with paper. Call June Kestrel. Call your guardians of patient rights. There has to be a legal way to do this." He held my gaze, the war inside him visible. Finally. He gave a short, violent nod. He turned to Ilya. "Get Kestrel, now." The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. June's voice, crisp and sharp over the speakerphone, was the only thing that kept me sane. "They cannot do that," she said. "The Guardians of Patient Rights Charter, the Preferred Caregiver Clause. You are her designated provider. They cannot restrict your access without a court order, and they cannot move her without your consent unless it is a medical emergency. This is administrative bad faith. I can get an emergency release order from a night judge. It will be paper. It will be legal." At 4 a.m, Ilya returned. He did not have a gun. He had a piece of paper stamped and signed. We did not take Bruno's sedan. We took a nondescript medical transport van. We drove to Mercy Hill as the sky was turning a sickly gray. Administrator Vance met us in the lobby, his face a mask of smug confidence. "I told you, Miss Linwood, visitation is—" June Kestrel stepped past me and slapped the court order onto his desk. "That is an emergency judicial release. Mr. Vance," she said, her voice like ice. "You have 10 minutes to have Mrs. Linwood ready for transport. If you obstruct this order, the next people through that door will be the Metropolitan Integrity Unit, and the charge will be kidnapping." Vance's smugness evaporated. He read the paper. He saw the judge's signature. He turned white. We walked out 20 minutes later, pushing my mother in a wheelchair. She was groggy, confused. They had given her a sedative. By the time we got her back to Arden Gate, the penthouse had been transformed while we were gone. Bruno had a full hospital bed, an oxygen tank, and a heart monitor delivered and installed in the empty guest room. He had been so sure of his violent plan, but he had prepared for my clean one. Ilya was setting up the last of the equipment when I saw him pause. "What is it?" I asked. He looked up from the humidifier he was plugging in. "A loose end," he said. "Brock, from the diner." "What about him? Did they fire him?" "He is missing," Ilya said, his voice flat. "Missing like he quit?" Ilya shook his head. "Missing. His car was found abandoned down by the shipyards, wiped clean. The word on the street is the board was not happy with his testimony at the hearing. They decided he was a liability. They cleaned up their own mess. The air left my lungs. Blood. It had been spilled, not by Bruno, but it was there. A man was dead because of this. Because of me." I found Bruno on the balcony, watching the sunrise. He had not slept. "Brock is dead." I said, "It was not a question." "I heard," he said, not turning. This is not clean. Bruno, this is not paper." He turned to face me. The morning light was harsh, carving deep lines around his eyes. This is the world you are fighting. Mara, we took their server. They took your mother. We took her back. They silenced their liability. This is the escalation. They have nothing left to lose. Their next move will not be with a clipboard. They have nothing left but violence. The promise, I whispered, the words feeling thin. The line. The line is where we draw it, he said, his voice rough. I will keep my word to you. I will not be the one to spill blood, but I cannot stop them. The most I can do is be ready for it. My gaze wavered. The simple, righteous anger I had felt was gone, replaced by a cold, complicated fear. He was right. That night, the penthouse was silent. My mother was sleeping, her breathing soft and regular, the drugs finally out of her system. We did not touch. Bruno and I sat in the dark, him in a chair on one side of the hospital bed, me on the other. The only light was the glow of the city through the huge windows. The only sound was the soft, steady hiss of the humidifier. Last night, we had been fire and rain, a storm of pent-up emotion. Tonight, we were just two exhausted people, keeping vigil. He did not reach for my hand. I did not lean on his shoulder. But he did not leave. He just sat with me, sharing the quiet. It was an intimacy that went deeper than a kiss. It was not passion. It was patience. The night was almost over when Ilya entered the room without knocking. He did not look at me. He looked at Bruno. They are moving. Bruno was on his feet in an instant. Where? The fire condemnation. They pushed it through, found a compliant judge. They are not waiting for an appeal. They are enforcing it. At dawn. I looked at the window. Dawn was less than an hour away. They are not just sending an inspector, Ilya continued. They are sending a full contingent of citywide compliance wardens, 50 men. They are not coming to post a notice. They are coming to erect a barricade. This was it, the final physical move. They close the diner. The block folds, Bruno said, his voice grim. I stood up. My mother was safe. The data was out, but Sandpiper Row, Mr. Petrov, Mrs. Sanchez. I am going back. I said Bruno turned to me, his eyes hard. No, it is a tactical retreat. We let them take it. We fight it in court. No, my voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet room. It is not a tactical retreat for them. It is their lives. If they wake up and see the blue comet boarded up, they will give up. They will sign the papers. The board wins. But I met his gaze. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. If they see me, I said, my voice quiet but unshakable, if they see me standing in my apron, if they see the neon on, the others will not run. Mara, this is not a hearing. This is 50 armed men. I know. I am not asking you to fight them. I am not asking you to break your promise, or mine. I am just going to be there. I am just a waitress, showing up for my shift. He looked at me for a long, heavy moment. He saw the iron in my spine. He knew he could not stop me. He stepped close. So close I could feel the heat radiating from him. He did not touch me. I will be there in under 4 minutes, he said, his voice a low, rough whisper. If you need me, if the line breaks. I know, I whispered back. Our eyes locked. It was not a promise of rescue. It was not a lover's vow. It was a hook, barbed and absolute, gaffing us together. A promise that when the final wire snapped, he would be standing there with me. 5:55 in the morning. Halyard Avenue was swallowed in a cold, gray fog, so thick it felt like the sky had fallen onto the pavement. The streetlights were just weak, blurry halos. I stood in front of the blue comet, the key cold in my hand. I was not wearing the Arden Gate clothes. I was in my own clean, pressed uniform. My apron was tied tight. I was a waitress, showing up for my shift. I unlocked the door. The diner was dark, silent, smelling of stale grease and old coffee. I walked behind the counter, my footsteps echoing. I reached for the main breaker. Click, buzz! The lights flickered, casting a sickly yellow glow. Then I hit the switch for the sign. Outside. The neon sputtered, fighting the fog, and then blazed to life, a defiant, electric blue arc. The blue comet was open. Before I did anything else, I took a piece of paper from my bag. It was a document June Kestrel had drafted at 4:30 this morning. It looked incredibly official, covered in seals and important-looking stamps. Notice property undergoing independent safety audit by Firewatch Analytics. A complete fabrication, but one that was technically filed with the city clerk's office a half hour ago, making it legally real. I taped it squarely in the middle of the glass door. I looked at the big wall clock, 5:57. I was stocking the napkin dispensers when I heard the first rumble. It was not a car. It was a fleet. I looked out the window. Through the fog, their headlights cut sharp, white beams. One truck, then two, then three. Heavy-duty vehicles, dark green, with the official city seal and the words "Citywide Compliance Wardens" painted on the side. They parked at harsh angles, sealing off the diner, blocking the entire street. Doors slammed, 50 men, maybe more, dressed in dark, heavy uniforms, emerged. They were not cops. They were an occupying force. Leading them, his face pale and set in a mask of petty tyranny, was Rainer Holt. He was not wearing his rumpled inspector's suit. He was in a black windbreaker with compliance stamped on the back. He held a clipboard and a bullhorn. He did not wait. He raised the bullhorn. "This is an official order. The Blue Comet Diner has been condemned as a public hazard. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises. 5 minutes. I saw her in the back, across the street, the blogger from the hearing. Her laptop was open on the roof of her car. Her camera pointed right at my door. She was live streaming. I smiled. It was a small, tight smile. Just for me. I looked at the big wall clock. It read 5:59. Holt was starting his countdown early. I reached up, my hand steady. I pulled the small Wender pin and turned the minute hand back. One full rotation. The clock now read 5:58. I would have my own time. Elastic time. Then I turned, faced the front door, and looked right at the lens of that camera across the street. I started to brew a pot of coffee. Holt and 2 wardens pushed through the door. The bell jangled angrily. "Did you hear me?" Holt snapped, his voice unnaturally loud without the bullhorn. "You have 5 minutes! Get out!" "I am sorry, sir," I said, my voice polite, my diner voice. "We open at 6. I'm still prepping." "Well, this is not a game," he shouted. "This property is seized here." He slammed a new order down on the counter, a fresh one, signed by a different judge. "I see your notice," I said, pointing to the door. "But I have mine. We are under an independent audit. Your order is in conflict. You will have to take it up with Firewatch Analytics." Holt was momentarily confused. He was a bully, not a debater. "You have 5 minutes, Mara," he snarled, finding his footing, "or you will be arrested for trespassing." He looked at his watch. "The countdown stands." Then, a new sound, shouting from outside. I looked past Holt's shoulder. The fog was still thick, but figures were emerging from it. Mr. Petrov, still in his white baker's pants, Mrs. Sanchez, pushing a laundry cart, dozens of them. The people of Sandpiper Row. They were marching, carrying signs handwritten on cardboard. They stopped at the line of trucks, facing the wardens. 2 of them unfurled a massive bedsheet banner in red paint. It read, "We serve with her." Holt's face went crimson. He had wanted a clean, silent removal. He was getting a protest, and it was all being live-streamed. "Get her out!" he yelled at his 2 men. "Arrest her!" The 2 wardens moved, stepping behind the counter. "Excuse me, officers," a quiet voice said. We all turned. Ilya Shore was sitting in the back booth, a full cup of coffee in his hand. I had not even seen him come in. He must have used the condiment room door. "This is a restricted area," one warden grunted. Ilya stood up slowly. He was just a customer. "I'm afraid you are mistaken," he said, reaching into his jacket. The wardens tensed, their hands moving to their belts. Ilya did not pull a weapon. He pulled a small, black leather wallet. He flipped it open inside. a heavy, polished badge. "Inspector, Bureau of Night Commerce," he said, his voice as flat and cold as a slab of marble. "Your condemnation order is in direct conflict with an active ruling from the Court of Commercial Ethics regarding this business. You are interfering in a federal-level investigation. The BNC, the fake agency, but the badge was real. The authority in his voice was real." The wardens stopped. This was above their pay grade. They looked at Holt. Holt was cornered. The paper war was a stalemate he was losing. "I do not care who you are," he shrieked. "This is my order. This is physical. Get these people out. Get her out now." He gave up on paper. He gave up on law. He chose force. The wardens were not thinkers. They were muscle. They followed the loudest order. One of them grabbed Ilya's arm. "You are coming, too." The other one lunged at me. It was chaos. Ilya did not resist. He simply used the man's grip, twisted, and sent the warden sprawling over a booth table. Outside, the crowd saw the scuffle. They surged forward, yelling. The line of wardens pushed back, using their heavy bodies as a wall. The second warden, the one coming for me, shoved me hard. "Get out!" I stumbled backward, tripping over a bar stool. I fell, my body hitting the hard linoleum floor. My head snapped back, and my cheek scraped against the metal foot of the counter. A sharp, stinging pain. The diner went silent for a second. The crowd outside went silent. I put my hand to my cheek. When I pulled it away, my fingers were red, blood. My line, it had been crossed. The warden was standing over me, his hand out. "I told you to—" "I'm not signing anything." I said it from the floor. My voice was not loud, but it was clear. I looked past him, past Holt, straight at the camera across the street. The blogger zoomed in. I could see the red light flash. I pushed myself up. Slowly. I did not cry. I did not scream. I wiped the small trail of blood from my cheek with the back of my hand, leaving a red smear. "My name is Mara Linwood," I said, my voice ringing in the tense silence. "I am an employee of the Blue Comet Diner, and I am not signing anything." Outside, a single voice yelled my name, "Mara!" Then another, "Mara!" Within seconds, the whole street was chanting it, "Mara, Mara, Mara!" Holt looked at his watch. He was frantic. "It does not matter, 4 minutes. Your time is up." Clang jingle. The front door opened. The wind pushed a bank of fog into the diner, swirling around the new arrival. It was Bruno. He was alone. No Ilya, no wardens. He was just a man in a perfect dark suit, and he was carrying a simple brown cardboard file box. He walked past Holt as if he were not there. He walked past the stunned wardens. He walked to the center of the counter and placed the box down with a solid, definitive thud. The chanting outside faded. Everyone was watching him. "You are trespassing," Holt blustered. Bruno did not look at him. He looked at me. He saw the cut on my cheek. His eyes, for just a fraction of a second, were not cold. They were fire. Then he turned to the box. He opened the flaps. "You came with paper, Raynor," Bruno said, his voice calm, conversational. "I brought some, too." He pulled out the first file. "This," he said, holding it up, "is the original, unredacted managerial contract between the Board of Urban Holdings and one Brock Peters, the one that details his operational fees for identifying tenants for removal." He tossed it on the counter. He pulled out a thick stack of printouts. This is the redline algorithm from your server, the one that specifically targets medical debt and single parents. The one Signal Wren has been monitoring for 6 months. He tossed that on the counter. "And this," he said, pulling out a final, single sheet of paper. "This is a real document from the Hospitality Oversight Guild." He held it up. The seal was embossed, golden, complex. "Your order," he said, pointing to the one Holt had slammed down, "has a very good forgery of this seal. But they got the color of the ink wrong. The real one is navy blue. Yours is black." Holt was the color of dirty ash. He was staring at the paper. He knew. "And you know who does care about forging a guild seal?" a new voice said. June Kestrel. She had slipped in behind Bruno, and she was holding a small, professional camera, its feed going live directly to the Court of Commercial Ethics. Holto took a step back, then another. He looked at his wardens, but they were not looking at him. They were looking at the two men in dark suits who had just entered the diner. They wore no uniforms. They just had the quiet, unassailable authority of men who held all the real power. Metropolitan Integrity Unit. One of them stepped up to Holt. "Rainer Holt, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted illegal seizure." The man clicked a pair of handcuffs onto Holt's wrist. The sound was as loud as a gunshot in the silent diner. The click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut on Rainer Holt's wrist echoed in the sudden silence. It felt final. The citywide compliance wardens, their authority evaporating, shuffled awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. Outside, the crowd on Sandpiper Row, seeing Holt let out in cuffs, let out a tentative cheer. It was not the end. A heavy, definitive thunk echoed from the side of the building, followed by an immediate, suffocating silence. The neon sign outside died with a buzz. The coffee pot stopped gurgling. The overhead lights vanished. We were plunged into a gray, foggy darkness, illuminated only by the emergency exit signs and the battery-powered light from the blogger's camera across the street. "He cut the main power," Ilya's voice said, sharp and low from the back. "The whole block." A new figure stepped into the diner, framed by the doorway. He was not a thug. He was not a bureaucrat. He was older, dressed in a bespoke suit that cost more than my mother's medical bills for the entire year. His face was calm. His eyes were the color of old ice. This was Silas Verne, the man at the top of the board. "Paperwork," Verna said, his voice cultured, amused. "It is so messy. Fraud, conspiracy. It takes years to litigate. I find, in the end, that a physical solution is always cleaner." He stepped past the frozen Metropolitan Integrity Unit officers. He was holding a small, black device in his hand, a red button gleaming on its surface. A detonator. "This is a very old building," Miss Linwood, when he said, stopping in the center of the room. "The gas lines are ancient. My associates have spent the last hour ensuring they are particularly fragile. The gas leak your friend reported was, in fact, quite real. I just needed him to clear the way." A wave of sickness rolled through me. The gas man, he'd been walking into a trap. "This is not a negotiation," Verna said, his voice hardening. He tossed a single piece of paper onto the counter, a full retraction of all my claims. "This is the final offer. You will sign that paper, or I will push this button. I will burn this tinderbox to the ground. Starting with this room, the choice is yours." He was not lying. The faint, sweet, sick smell of natural gas was now unmistakable. This was the final knot. I looked at Bruno. He was standing by the counter, a statue in the gloom. He had promised me no blood. But this was a bomb. Verna had checkmated him. Bruno's face was ice. He was not looking at Verna. He was looking at me. He calmly picked up the metal spoon from his coffee cup, the one he had used just before. He held my gaze. Ting. He tapped the cup. Ting. A second time. Ting. A third defiant chime in the face of a bomb. Vern laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "What is that? Mr. Corsetti calling for reinforcements? A little late, your men are gone. It is just you, me, and the girl. Sign the paper. Mara." He was wrong. On the roof, 3 stories above, the 2 gas engineers from Signal Wren had never left. They were not utility workers. They were crisis technicians. The audio signal 3 distinct pings on a secure frequency was all they needed. The lead technician spun a heavy, red industrial wheel, a loud hiss, a solid clunk, and the main gas line to the Blue Comet was severed at the street. "You are a fool, Vern," June Kestrel's voice snapped. A brilliant beam of light hit the wall. Coming from the mini projector in her hand, she was projecting the blogger's live feed. Verna, holding the detonator, was the star. "You're being broadcast live to the Court of Commercial Ethics," June said, her voice like steel. She switched the image, projecting black and white text, Hartford Municipal Code, Section 94A, the use of an incendiary or explosive threat against a civilian population. A non-bailable offense. The whole city is watching you threaten to blow up a block. Vern's mask of control shattered. He looked at the wall, at his own face, at the text. He looked at the useless detonator in his hand. He had lost. His leverage was gone. He did the last thing a cornered rat can do. He lunged. Not at Bruno, not at June, at me. He was fast, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. "You!" he screamed. But Bruno was faster. He did not pull a gun. He did not throw a punch. He did not break his promise. He moved into the lunge, not meeting force with force, but redirecting it. He took Verna's shoulder with his own, absorbing the impact, spinning him. As Verna's arm, the one with the detonator, flew up, Bruno caught the wrist. It was a clean, fluid motion, a perfect, bloodless joint lock. Vern cried out, a high-pitched sound of pain and shock. The detonator clattered harmlessly to the floor. Bruno pinned him against the counter, his arm immobilized, his threat neutralized. It was over. No blood, just leverage. The remaining wardens, seeing their ultimate boss defeated and humiliated, raised their hands, backing away. The MIU officers stepped in, taking the whimpering Verna from Bruno's iron grip. They cuffed him. "Silas Vern," the lead officer said, "you are under arrest." As they led Vern and the cuffed Holt out into the fog, Ilya stepped to the main breaker box by the door. He paused, then flipped the heavy switches, one by one. Clunk! The lights flickered, the coffee pot gurgled. Buzz! Outside, the blue Comet neon sign blazed back to life, a triumphant, defiant blue in the gray dawn. The crowd, which had been holding its breath, exploded. It was not a cheer. It was a roar, a sound of pure, cathartic victory that echoed down Halyard Avenue. My knees gave out. I gripped the counter to stay standing. My phone buzzed in my apron, then buzzed again and again. It was a flood of mass emails. Mr. Petrov, Mrs. Sanchez, the tenants of Sandpiper Row, the board, now under MIU control, had sent a full retraction. Due to a review of predatory algorithms, all recent rent increases are hereby rescinded. The paper war was won. I looked up. Bruno was straightening his cuffs. He was immaculate, as if nothing had happened. He walked toward me, stopping just inches away. He looked at the small, drying cut on my cheek. His expression for the first time was unguarded. It was intense, and it was soft. "You came," I whispered, my voice thick. "You really did come in under 4 minutes." He lifted his hand. He did not touch my face, not the cut. His fingers brushed the fabric of my uniform, a feather-light touch just over my collarbone. His eyes asked the question that hung between us. "Are you still leaving the promise I had made? If there is blood, I walk." The line had been crossed, but not by him. I shook my head. Just a fraction. I was not going anywhere. I reached up and took his hand, the hand that had disarmed Verna. I brought it to my chest, pressing his warm, strong palm flat against my uniform, right over my hammering heart. "Here," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I'm staying right here." He let out a breath, a sound he had been holding in. "Mara." He leaned in, his other hand coming to rest on my back, not grabbing, not pulling, but supporting, holding me steady. His lips met mine. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss from the storm. This was slow, it was firm, it was sweet, and it was the taste of victory. It was the promise of a man who used paper like a sword and his strength as a shield. Across the street, the blogger's camera zoomed in, trying to capture the moment, but the diner was dark and the neon was bright. All she caught, all the city saw, was a silhouette in the window. 2 figures merged into one, bathed in the steady, electric blue light of the blue comet. The diner did not close. It became the heart of Sandpiper Row. The Civic Integrity Council, shamed by the live feed, began a full-scale reform. I still worked the night shift. I still pour black coffee. I still wipe down the counters. But some nights, my shift is covered. On those nights, I am on a wide balcony at Arden Gate, watching the fog roll in over the Harbor Line River. And if I look long enough, I can almost always see the silver-gray shape of a heron, wings spread, cutting through the twilight. Bruno stands beside me. He does not hold my hand. He does not put his arm around me unless I ask. He's not a cage. He's a guardian. The waitress was given 5 minutes to disappear. She chose to stand, and the man who came in under 4 minutes to make the world stand still for her to walk on. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Please, let me know in the comments and share any of your thoughts. I would love to connect with you. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. It truly helps. And if you want to give an extra bit of support, please consider hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.